Welcome back. All right, so we're going to talk today about Rick DiPietro as we're on the verge of free agency, and I feel like it's a good time to talk about contracts. And the funny thing is, that's what DiPietro is known for, is for a contract which ended up being bad. But at the time it was signed, you could understand what the New York Islanders were doing. Now, that being said, this was a tumultuous time for the Islanders. Mike Milbury was in charge in 2000, and he decided, I want to draft DiPietro first. Now, I have Luongo, I think DiPietro has a higher upside than Luongo, and we don't need two really good young goaltenders. So he trades Luongo, and DiPietro's drafted. Now, the problem is, number 2 in the draft is Danny Heatley, and number 3 in the draft is Marian Gaborik. And obviously, with hindsight being as 2020 as it is, we could all say, you know, if he kept Luongo and if he had drafted Heatley instead, things might have gone better for the Islanders. That being said, DiPietro gets drafted during this really tumultuous time, and he gets thrown to the Wolves that first year. 2000-2001, plays 20 games, has a record of 3-15-1, 878 save percentage, and everything said he wasn't ready yet. Everything said they've got to stop playing him as much as they are. He's not ready for the National Hockey League. So they saw this, and in 01-02, he spends the whole year in the minors. 02-03, he only plays 10 games for the New York Islanders that year. Record of 2-5-2, 894 save percentage. So the save percentage gets better. The win-loss record's still not great, but it's the Islanders. So during the time of Milbury, there were some losing seasons in there. And so he played one game in the playoffs that year, didn't allow a goal in that one appearance, didn't get a decision either. He was there in relief. 03-04, he's given the reins. You're the starter now. 50 games, a record of 23-18-5, 911 save percentage. So the save percentage comes up a lot. The 23 wins isn't too bad. His record in the playoffs, 5 games, a 1-4 record, 908 save percentage. So he's their starter. He's the playoff starter. And things aren't looking too bad, right? So 04-05, of course, is wiped out by the lockout. We get the salary cap, and immediately GMs are trying to find a way around the salary cap, and that's what I'm making this video to discuss too. 05-06, he plays 63 games, which was 6th overall in the NHL that year, a record of 30-24-5. The 24 losses are 8th overall in the NHL that year. He had a 900 save percentage, but he played well. He played well that year, and so at a $2.5 million cap hit, they got their money's worth there, and they decide we want to keep him, but we don't want to have our cap to go out of control here. So the 15-year contract, which of course we all talk about regularly in hockey circles, is signed. But there's a reason they gave him the 15-year contract, and there's a reason the NHL hated these contracts. They were very often backdiving contracts, meaning you would add years at the end of these contracts to artificially bring the cap hit down. So you might have a guy on the ice who's making $9 million that year, and the actual cap hit is half of that. That's just one way of looking at it. That's why the NHL's made it so they can't structure contracts that way. They can't. You can't have it. So a 15-year deal for $67.5 million, $4.5 million per season. So again, for a starting goaltender, $4.5 million, even in this era, not bad. The 15 years is crazy, but I mean, I don't think they figured he was going to play the whole 15 years. They just figured this is our starter. We want to keep him around. And this contract means that we're showing our fans that we have faith. Alexei Yashin got a 10-year contract from them as well. And so this was the time of the Islanders giving out really long contracts to their players. And he reacted well enough with that contract. A record of 32-19-9 over 62 games. The 9 overtime and shootout losses was 2nd overall in the NHL that year. But 919 save percentage, which was 6th. So he played well. In the playoffs, 4 games, a 1-3 record, and an 898 save percentage. So no real traction in the playoffs, but Islanders had trouble in the playoffs for a long time. But honestly, at this point, it looks like the contract, while we're still talking about the term and how ridiculous it is, the cap hit's fine. You know, $4.5 million for a guy who's top 10 in save percentage, it's fine. Then 07-08, 63 games played, 26-28-7 record. The 28 losses is 3rd overall that year in the NHL. The 7 overtime and shootout losses is 10th overall in the NHL that year at a 902 save percentage. But he played in an All-Star game that year. So again, everything looks pretty good. Now, he did suffer a concussion over this period as well. And the concussion would be the start of things. So what ends up happening with DiPietro is just a lot of unfortunate events, starting with knee problems, knee surgeries. So he was limited to 5 games in 2008-2009, a 1-3 record and an .892 save percentage. And this is when people started looking at that 15-year contract and going, man, it's only been a couple of years since he signed that, and he only played 5 games because of knee surgery. And then it gets worse. In 09-10, he only played 8 games, a 2-5 record, 900 save percentage, because he was still having complications of his knee with surgeries and injuries and all that fun stuff. And so he was really, really beat up at that point. So 13 games over a 2-year period. So now the Islanders are in a situation where they don't know they can trust him, right? So you got Dwayne Rollison coming in. Well, eventually they trade Rollison out during the 2010-2011 season because they're giving DiPietro back the net. 26 games that year, 8-14-4 record, .886 save percentage. Not great numbers. And this was the year that he came out. He had the fight with Brent Johnson. One punch from Brent Johnson broke his jaw and took him out. And so when he came back, he was wearing the helmet cage a la Chris Osgood. And so that knocked him out for a decent period of time. And it was one of those things that I remember at the time thinking, you know, if you have a contract like that, you probably shouldn't be out there fighting. And I've had that debate for years on this channel about, you know, high-profile players going out there and having a fight. You can get injured during a fight. It absolutely can happen, and I don't think it's worth the risk for some players. No shade being thrown at guys that do, but goalie fight, Brent Johnson definitely got the better of that one. And, of course, that footage became pretty famous / infamous, depending on which side you're on in terms of your fandom. 2011-2012, he dealt with a concussion. Then he dealt with groin issues, which led to hernia surgery. So that year he only played 8 games, had a 3-2-3 record, .876 save percentage. This is where just the injuries are piling up. And you're not going to be getting the time for all your on and off ice training you need. And it just keeps adding up. So 2012-2013, he only played 3 games with the New York Islanders. Had an 0-3 record, .855 save percentage, and they waived him and sent him down to Bridgeport. Bridgeport, he had a touch-and-go relationship there, and it just didn't quite work for him. And so on July 3rd of 2013, he's officially bought out. They started the process on the 1st by waiving him unconditionally. And so what that did was it gave them a $1.5 million cap hit until 2029. Because of the amount of time left on this contract, you double it. And so it takes that contract till 2029 for the New York Islanders. And it is definitely something that I don't know how in the world I could say this, but yeah, I think if teams were still allowed to sign 15-year contracts, I think there'd be a GM out there that would be willing to do it. And so the NHL had to step in and say, all right, we're capping the contracts at 8 years. And then as UFAs, if it's a new team, at 7 years. They had to do it. They had to do it because of contracts like this, which were designed in part to get around the salary cap. Kovalchuk, the 15-year deal he signed, is another good example of that. As I said, with Luongo, Weber, and whatnot, Keith too. So he's bought out March 5th of 2007. Just as a good note here too, he did record a New York Islanders record 56 saves against the New York Rangers in a shootout loss. He did get a professional tryout with the Charlotte Checkers on October 25th, 2013, and they played him, but they would ultimately release him on November 26th. They being the farm team at the time of the Carolina Hurricanes. It just, at that point, it was just gone. And with a goaltender, when it's gone, that's it. It is one of those interesting positions in sports where, like, if you have a forward that can score a bunch of goals and that offense disappears, it's okay. He might be really good as a bottom 6 forward defenseman. You could throw him in the bottom 2, but if it's a goaltender, there's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere else for him to go. And so once his career was done in the NHL, he had played 318 games, 130 wins, 136 losses, 36 losses in overtime shootouts combined with ties. 8 of those are ties. A .902 save percentage in his career. He only played 10 playoff games. I mentioned the Islanders having struggles at that point. 2-7 record with a .904 save percentage. And then the smart thing he did was, after his career was done, didn't cry about it. He got into radio afterwards, had a successful radio show, and then ended up going to ESPN when they got that contract last year. And I think he's a good analyst. So Rick DiPietro has managed to maintain a career in hockey, even though he is no longer playing hockey. And that contract that was signed in 2006 would have expired in 2021 if he had kept playing and if he hadn't been basically forced out with the buyout, because just all those injuries added up. And, the knees, the groin, concussions, it really adds up fast. So this is why the NHL in part gets rid of 15-year contracts, and this is the danger of those long-term contracts too, because you never know when that next guy is going to be that he takes a hit the wrong way and that's it, right? So anyways, there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.